As a camper who prefers the wilderness, the sight of a freeway in St. Louis certainly had me feeling the blues. However, it was just a temporary situation. My destination was a quiet shelter location amongst the trees in the Columbia Bottom Conservation Area, just north of St. Louis. This was an important landmark for two explorers named Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Well, it took a little bit of traveling to get here, but this is what I came for. This is where the Missouri empties out into the Mississippi, the confluence. And as you can see, it's a little bit high. There's been a lot of rain, a lot of flooding, and so the sunshine, which I haven't seen in a long time, is a little bit deceiving. But this also marks the place where in May 1804, Lewis and Clark headed up the Missouri. America is blessed with many freshwater rivers, and the longest and mightiest of them both start with the letter M. The Mississippi runs from Minnesota south to the Gulf of Mexico near New Orleans, while the Missouri starts in West Montana and flows 2,300 miles to Missouri. Where the two rivers meet is in St. Louis. My original intent was simply to follow the Missouri to a source and visit some of the places that Lewis and Clark noted in their journals. This, however, proved to be a little challenging, and as videos go, kinda boring. As I traveled, I looked for other stories, but will mention Lewis and Clark points of interest whenever I find them. Set out in the presence of many of the neighboring inhabitants, and proceeding on under the gentle breeze up the Missouri. Okay, I have no idea what William Clark sounded like. But with me being more of a camper than a historian, I'd like to show you a few of the camping spots I found along the way. I'm sure L&C pushed their keelboat onto the Missouri River with great fanfare. However, I just took the Clark Bridge over to Illinois, as my first camp would be on the Illinois River, not the Missouri. The weather was not the greatest, but eased up a little as I approached the Pierre Marquette campground. Nothing special about this campsite. It was a standard RV spot with hookups. Just a place to park my trailer as I explored the area a little. With few campers in late April, I expected it would be a nice place for a little peace and quiet. Unfortunately, my peace was interrupted by Lawnmower Man, as RV parks need groomed grass. This was a cue for a little exploring. Pierre Marquette State Park is quite stunning this time of year, trees bursting with leaves and the birds rapping out strange songs. It was also a good viewpoint to see the state of the overflowing rivers below. The Illinois was high and had engulfed the local marina and picnic area. The swallows didn't seem to mind, however. But by the water line on the restroom, it had been much worse. After hitching my trailer back up, I headed for the Brussels Ferry dock. The plan was to avoid the mad rush of the St. Louis freeways by taking a gentle trip across the Illinois and Mississippi using local ferry service. The Illinois was a breeze, but as I drove through the river delta, the water at both sides appeared to be a little close. I was not, however, prepared for this. The Mississippi had decided to take a detour to the Illinois River, flowing across the only road to Brussels. And it wasn't just a little puddle. The further I got, the deeper it became, until the only way I knew I was even on a road was by judging the position of the waterfalls as they plunged downstream off the pavement. Turning around while towing a trailer wasn't an option, and the further I got, the harder it was to see. This continued for nearly half a mile. But I finally forded the river and saw pavement again. The good news that all that accumulated salt and mud under my trailer and Jeep was now washed clean. It seems, however, some previous travelers weren't as lucky. Despite the minor ordeal, I made it to the Winfield Ferry East Dock. Not very picturesque, but it was at least above the waterline. I'm going to be out and about on a boat, because here comes the ferry. Well, me and my trailer are on the Mississippi River. I'd rather be on top of it than underneath it right now. Thank you. See ya. Now safely back on Missouri soil, I can fill you in on my travel route. The state of Missouri is riddled with roads going every direction. But to keep it simple, I got onto the I-70 at Warrington and headed west. After passing the Missouri River west of Columbia, I'd had enough of interstate driving and took a side road to the north. This put me on the Lewis and Clark Trail and Highway 65, to a place I found by sheer luck. Well, the official population of Grand Pass is 53, but tonight it's 54. More of a hamlet than a village, one curious landmark was this old vault, the remains of a long-retired local bank. No money. But there was also one more local attraction, or maybe it was a distraction. With the trailer all ready and stuff unpacked, I'd be able to test my theory in a few hours. only went by 2 or 3 times in the night, so I did get a little sleep. Well, I got to admit, it's certainly not every community you can go to a little town and find a park like that, park your trailer, and expect to be able to camp overnight. But I came in here, I parked, and within seconds somebody came up to me and said hello, and I asked the big question, is it okay for me to camp here? And they said, well, I guess we better check with the mayor. Checked with the mayor, who just lives a few hundred feet up that way. The mayor was happy, everybody was happy, and they let me stay. And I really appreciate it because it's a beautiful little community. And that old hand pump on display was actually a real well. I've got a beautiful place to stay, no charge. There's some wonderful things to see in this area. And especially, I'm really happy I'm going to get to see Jim the Wonder Dog. Before yesterday, I'd never heard of a place called Grand Pass, and I certainly had never seen a wonder dog. But as I drove up Highway 65, a sign caught my eye, so small most would miss it. But here it is, Jim the Wonder Dog Museum, 1 mile. The center of Marshall is a county clerk's office that's surrounded on all 4 sides with impressive architecture. It looks like a postcard from the 1930s. In the northwest corner is the Wonder Dog Museum. And Jim's presence is everywhere. To find out about Jim, you need to first travel back in time, as the wonders of Marshall's famous canine happened over 80 years ago. And ladies and gentlemen, here's Jim.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, step right up for the big show. Loud and voice is applause.
And this is the very same spot the crowds gathered to see Jim perform, which has recently become known as Wonder Dog Memorial Park.
Let's go, boys.
Well, I'm in Marshall, Missouri, and this is Jim the Wonder Dog. Captured in bronze stands the life-size statue of Jim at full attention to his master's command. Hey, Jim. On the plaque below is a very brief summary of this prize puppy's life and fame. Born as an English Llewellyn setter, he was purchased by Sam Vannersdale as a hunting dog. However, Jim proved to be much more than an excellent hunter. So what made Jim a wonder dog? Well, during the era of the Depression, he performed some amazing feats. Amongst the unexplainable feats was for Jim to identify people in the crowd with instructions like the man who had the most change in his pocket, the girl with the blue dress, or the car with a certain license plate number. All requests were written on a sheet of paper because Jim, quite naturally, could read. He could answer any question in any language. It could be in English, French, shorthand, or Morse code. Jim's keen sense was beyond human comprehension. And he could tell if your baby was going to be male or female. But there's more.
Step right up, folks, and see Jim the Hunting Dog of the Century, featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not. Hear him foil the whiskey thief and brand the Lindbergh kidnapper.
He could predict the outcome of sports events. He could predict the future. Now this one really caught my attention, as there's no way to manipulate a dog to answer on something that hasn't happened yet. In Florida, this got Jim in hot water, for after selecting winning bets, death threats forced Jim and Sam to flee town. So Jim, who's going to win the Stanley Cup playoffs this year? You're kidding. Never would have thought. Amazing, Jim. The Wonder Dog. Well, even if you're a little skeptical, there's no reason you can't just enjoy Jim's little garden, view the goldfish in the pond, and read the stories on plaques placed around the walkway. Jim's presence is always felt. So if you're in between St. Louis and Kansas City and you're on that scary interstate, avoid the trucks, come on into Marshall, and say hello to Jim. He'll be glad to see you. Floodwaters and wonder dogs are all very entertaining, but what I needed now was a good hike. The hills of the Missouri were rich in vibrant greens, with vines pretty well clinging to everything. Van Meter State Park has a few small trails and lookouts to enjoy, and it's another point of interest for the Lewis and Clark expedition. In June 1804, they camped here near an old abandoned native village after making little progress going upstream. Through the underbrush, you can see the Missouri in the distance and the flooded plains that surround it. 25 miles to the west is the port of Waverly, right on the banks of the Missouri. Of note to campers, a modest $10 fee gets you a flat pad to camp on, a restroom with running water, and a sheltered picnic area, plus a great riverside view. Lewis and Clark camped here on June 17th and 18th to make oars from local trees. This was the swiftest current the explorers encountered, wearing out the men and their oars. Clark recorded the current at over 23 miles per hour. Even today you can see how fast the water flows here. Watch how the current swirls around in this time-lapse video. It would be a very tricky river to navigate. With hiking done for the day, I arrived back in Grand Pass, waiting for my regular visitor. Little towns like Grand Pass and Waverly and Marshall, I mean, to me, these are stories of resiliency and community, because many places just would not survive. I mean, this place originally started off as a railroad town, but when the railroad stopped delivering passengers, there had to have been a crisis. But fortunately, roads came through, so there was still a community and they could still get supplies. But later on, another crisis would have happened when an interstate came through, because that took away everybody from the community and everybody just rushes back and forth from one big city to the other. However, it was the interstate that got me here, because I was tired of fighting with trucks on an interstate. So I took a side road and found this wonderful place. It's just, America is so gifted to have little towns like this, where everybody knows everybody else, that as soon as you get into town, somebody says hello. The sense of community, the sense of history, and the sense of faith. Because there's no gas stations here, there's no bars. But there are 2 churches, and that counts for a lot of faith. Leaving little towns with big hearts for fast highways with big trucks is never preferred but sometimes necessary. I hope you enjoyed this video and will follow me on my other river travels that lay ahead. Hey Jim, he's kind of stoned, you know what I mean?